When you're sewing slippery fabrics, sometimes when you get those fabrics faced together, they slip against each other. So when you're trying to sew your seam, the edges will creep and you'll get an uneven seam. So whether you're sewing a fabric that's just slippery on its face side, or if it's napped like a minky or a faux fur or a velvet, some of these tips might help you keep those layers together and prevent that creepage. So the first tip I have is to use lots of pins. And there are some people who sew who don't really like to use pins, but in this instance, pins will be your friend. So lots of pins and pinning parallel to the seam line. Some people like to pin perpendicular to the seam line, like this. But pinning parallel to the seam line bites so much more fabric together along the direction that you're trying to sew. So that can help keep your fabric together a little bit more as it's going under the presser foot. You can also baste on each side of the seam line. So take a hand sewing needle and thread and run long basting stitches on each side of the seam line. So if your seam line was going to be right here, baste on each side, and that's really going to hold that fabric in place as you're sewing that seam. Another thing you can do is shorten your stitch length a little bit. A longer stitch length provides more opportunity between each stitch for the fabric to shift. Your feed dogs are moving more fabric at a time. So decrease your stitch length a little bit, and that's going to help those layers stay together as well. Another thing you can try is using this tool, which is called tissue paper. So this is just the tissue paper that you get in your gift bags. You can also save the tissue paper that you cut away from your commercial patterns and use it for this purpose. So 2 layers of velvet, the nap of a velvet against the nap of a velvet is much more slippery and slidey than the nap of a velvet against something that is that has a not napped face, like your tissue paper. So place a layer of this between your layers, and then once you're done stitching the seam, just tear that tissue paper away. The needle will perforate the paper and you can just tear it away. You can also try decreasing your presser foot pressure. So the presser foot pressure is the amount of force that the presser foot is pushing down onto the throat plate and onto the fabric. So decreasing the amount that is pressing down will help those layers glide together under the presser foot and stay together. If this is pressing down too hard, the bottom layer of fabric is going to get pulled along by the feed dogs, but the top layer of fabric is just against the bottom side of your presser foot here. That can get trapped a little bit and you'll get a lot of creepage. So decreasing the presser foot pressure, sometimes there will be a knob up here that has this little foot icon sometimes, and there's a plus and a minus on the knob, so you can turn it toward the minus to decrease your presser foot pressure. Not all machines allow you to make this adjustment. Sometimes the knob it might be in a different place. If you have a computerized machine, it might be in the settings, but check your machine manual for that adjustment.
Hey, sorry for the interruption, but Emily here, and I want to tell you about a super cool offer that I have for you from Craftsy. If you don't know what Craftsy is, it is an online community with resource of millions of creative and like-minded makers where members can find endless inspiration, advance the skills you already have, or discover a new favorite hobby or craft that you've always wanted to try. Craftsy offers more than 2,000 exciting classes in over 20 popular categories, everything from sewing and crochet to baking and painting. The classes are broken down into easy to follow lessons and are led by friendly, award-winning instructors like me who share creativity, wisdom, and provide step-by-step tutorials. I loved Ashley Huff's sewing class on how to sew super cute skirts. I'm not much of a garment sewer myself, but she had so many approachable tips and tricks on how to make this pattern so easy with her instruction. And I also loved Brenda K.B. Anderson's crochet class on how to crochet rainbow home decor because let's be honest, who doesn't love a giant rainbow pillow? She also had some amazing tips on how to turn your work when making curves in crochet. I got so inspired by Heather Thomas's class on creative finishing and edging for her quilt, and she reminded me just how awesome and fun it can be to embellish the finished edges of your quilt. She also taught me a new method for how to make the corners of my quilts even more precise. And a huge thank you to Craftsy for sponsoring today's video. The cool thing is though, as a Craftsy member, you will also have access to live stream tutorials where experts answer questions, share tips, and engage with the Craftsy community in real time, which I absolutely love. So the first 1,000 people to click on the link in the video description will get a full year of premium membership for Craftsy for only $1.49. So click the link below and let's get creative together.
You can also try using a walking foot. So the walking foot is essentially like having a set of feed dogs on the bottom of the foot. So you have these little grippy feed dogs that come onto the bottom of the presser foot, and quilters use this a lot when they have their quilt sandwiches. So they got their fabric and their batting all layered together, and this helps all of those layers feed together evenly under the presser foot. So this can help when you're using slippery fabric as well. You can also use this tool, your stick of washable glue. So if you use this in the seam allowances of whatever seam you're trying to sew, so I recommend using it just within the seam allowance. You can test it on your fabric and make sure it will wash out, make sure it won't leave a mark, but just using it in the seam allowances is a little bit of extra protection just so that it doesn't get on the face of your project at all. So that's going to help keep those layers together, and if you do use this, just make sure you wait for the glue to dry before you start sewing, just in case your needle hits somewhere where there was glue. If it wasn't dry yet, that could potentially gunk up your needle. Along the same vein, you can use temporary spray adhesive. They come in aerosol bottles, and quilters use this a lot too to adhere their quilt sandwiches together, and it's a temporary adhesive, so it sticks a little bit, but you can still pull it apart. But it might be just enough, just what you need to hold those layers of slippery fabric together. And again, test it on your fabric, check the bottle to make sure it will wash out, and test it to make sure it won't mar your fabric. Lastly, you can employ this technique where you hold your fabric taut as it's going under the presser foot. So you can hold your seam in front and behind and just apply a gentle pressure in opposite directions and let the feed dogs do their work. Let the feed dog pull the fabric. You're not pulling the fabric through, you're just holding it taut and holding those layers together where you want them to be while the feed dogs pull the fabric and glide under the presser foot. So if you're using a knit, this is not a good technique to use. You don't want to stretch out that fabric, but if you're using a woven, just that amount of pressure can help keep those layers together and keep them from shifting. So if you're using some slippery fabric, whether it is something that is just very slinky and slick or a napped fabric, hopefully some of these tips will help you prevent creeping and so you get even seams every time.